Welcome to Security Thursday, Leadership in Digital Sovereignty. This is not just about security controls or frameworks, it's about responsibility, clarity, and the decisions that shape how secure an organization really is.
Absolutely.
And, I want you to imagine a $20 million digital fortress, right? And it's completely defeated by a tired, underpaid security guard with a heavy rock.
It happens more than you'd think.
Right. So today, we are just entirely bypassing the corporate IT jargon. We're throwing out the PowerPoint compliance checklist. I want to speak directly to you, the listener, right out of the gate.
Yeah, because it really doesn't matter what your title is.
Exactly. It does not matter if you are a C-level executive staring down this massive bloated IT budget or an IT director in the trenches trying to keep the servers from melting. Or maybe you're just someone who is intensely curious about how massive systems actually function or how they fail under extreme pressure.
Which is really what we're digging into today.
Right. Our mission for this deep dive is to look at the psychological mechanics, the deeply human leadership decisions that define whether an organization is genuinely safe or, just pretending to be.
And doing that requires us to completely dismantle the way most corporate hierarchies view problem solving.
Yeah, we have to tear it down.
We really do. We are drawing heavily on the work of Stephen A. Davis today, specifically looking at his observations from the security industry and his philosophy on modern leadership.
Right.
At the very foundation of his work is a concept that redefines professional capability, especially in high-stakes environments. It is the concept of the scanner nature or the scanner personality.
I have to admit, I came into this material with a bit of a bias.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've always operated under the assumption that if you have the budget, you can essentially buy your way out of risk.
The classic trap.
Right. You hire the most specialized experts, you buy the most advanced tools, and you build a wall. But the scanner concept completely upends that. It's just a very different way of looking at how the human brain processes complex environments.
Well, it upends it because the traditional corporate system, and frankly the educational system that feeds it, is designed to heavily reward hyper-specialization.
Like staying in your lane.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They reward what we call the diver. The person who goes a mile deep on one very specific, incredibly narrow topic.
Right, like the database architect who only speaks SQL.
Yes. Or the HR manager who only focuses on compliance law and nothing else. That siloed thinking is highly efficient for predictable linear tasks.
But security isn't predictable.
Not at all. And Davis argues that the scanner personality operates on a completely different cognitive frequency. A scanner thrives on versatility, on lateral thinking.
So they aren't just looking at the firewall.
No, they do not just look at one piece of the puzzle. Their entire cognitive drive is geared towards seeing the hidden architecture connecting different disciplines.
Man, that really resonates with something I've always felt but just couldn't name. It's that feeling of having a room full of seemingly unrelated disciplines, right?
Yeah.
Like having a book on behavioral psychology, sitting next to a network architecture diagram, next to a financial risk matrix. And the scanner is the one who recognizes that it is actually a single cohesive picture.
Yes. They don't think in linear steps. They think in these vast, interconnected networks.
But corporate structures hate that.
They do. It's a tragedy, really. They often punish scanners. They view them as unfocused or scattered because they refuse to stay in one lane.
Right.
But grasping modern cybersecurity absolutely demands this exact scanner mindset. If you are an IT director or a CEO and you only look at the configuration of your firewall, you have already lost.
Because the attackers aren't staying in their lane either.
Exactly. The threat landscape is not linear. You must possess the cognitive versatility to look at human psychology, the intense quarter-end business pressure from sales, the physical layout of your office, and the technical infrastructure.
And synthesize all of it.
All of them simultaneously.
Because the ransomware cartels don't care about internal corporate silos. They don't respect the fact that HR handles employee training and IT handles the network defense.
They love that you have those silos.
Right. They're actively hunting for the blind spots in the seams between those departments.
And the scanner leader sees those seams before the attacker does. They map the dependencies that a diver would completely overlook. And when we use a scanner's perspective to zoom out and look at the whole board, the very first thing that becomes glaringly obvious is a massive, almost comical contradiction in modern business.
Oh, you are talking about the disconnect between the financial capital companies deploy for defense and the actual daily behavioral reality of their workforce.
Yes. the security
The
paradox.
sources call it the security paradox, and frankly, this paradox is just wild to me. We see organizations scaling up their defenses at an unprecedented rate.
Oh, the budgets are massive.
They are investing heavily in highly visible, incredibly advanced security technology, buying unified threat management systems, deploying advanced heuristics,
Mhm.
which, for anyone outside of the engineering team, just means software that looks for suspicious behavior patterns instead of just known viruses.
Exactly.
Mm.
They are buying the absolute best-in-class digital armor available on the market.
Right.
The board of directors reviews that massive capital expenditure. They see the flashy vendor logos on a slide deck, and a really dangerous psychological shift occurs.
What happens?
Everyone in the room subconsciously agrees that the risk has been mitigated. The problem has just been outsourced to a machine.
But the paradox, and this is the part that fundamentally challenges my initial assumption about buying safety, is that as the financial spending on those automated protections increases, the actual sense of personal responsibility among the employees actively
And it
shrinks.
shrinks drastically.
Like they just stop caring.
Essentially, yes. The organization is attempting to purchase its way out of systemic responsibility. This taps into a deeply ingrained psychological trap known as cognitive offloading. You could think of it as the bystander effect of enterprise IT.
Okay, let me make sure I'm mapping this correctly. The bystander effect is the psychological phenomenon where, say, if someone is injured on a crowded street, nobody calls for help because every single person assumes the person next to them has already dialed emergency services.
Yes. The responsibility is diffused across the crowd to the point of zero action.
Right.
And the exact same diffusion of responsibility happens within a corporate network. When the workforce, from the junior developer all the way up to the CFO, looks at a multi-million-dollar AI-driven security apparatus, their internal narrative changes.
So security is no longer viewed as a shared cultural posture.
No, it ceases to be a daily human practice. It devolves into a purchased utility, much like the plumbing or the HVAC system in the building.
Oh, wow.
You just expect the air conditioning to pump cold air, right? You don't spend your day thinking about the Freon levels.
Wait, I don't buy that. I really have to push back on this framing because it feels completely counterintuitive to basic logic and self-preservation.
Okay, lay it on me.
Let's step away from IT for a second. If I go out and buy a state-of-the-art car with lane assist, automatic braking, blind spot monitoring, and a reinforced steel cage, I am objectively safer than I would be driving a tin can from the 1980s.
Sure, objectively.
Right. So why would adding a highly sophisticated data leakage prevention tool to a corporate network make an employee more reckless? The tool is actively watching their back. It is a safety net.
The car analogy is fascinating, but it actually exposes the flaw in that logic.
How so?
When you are sitting in the driver's seat of that highly advanced car, feeling the steering wheel in your hands, you remain acutely aware that you are still driving.
Yeah.
You might be slightly more relaxed because of the lane assist, but you know intrinsically that the legal, physical, and moral responsibility rests entirely with you if you run a red light and hit a pedestrian. The feedback loop of responsibility is immediate and visceral.
Right, because my physical body is on the line.
Exactly. But in corporate IT, that visceral feedback loop does not exist.
Oh.
When the digital tools become advanced enough, the user subconsciously assumes the machine is the one driving the car. They take their hands entirely off the wheel.
They assume the data leakage prevention software is omnipotent.
They really do. Let's look at the $20 million port security analogy from the source material to see how this plays out in physical space.
The digital fortress defeated by the rock.
That's the one. Imagine a massive international shipping port handling billions of dollars in cargo.
High stakes.
Very high stakes. The executive team decides to secure their perimeter against theft and smuggling. They authorize a $20 million budget. They install state-of-the-art biometric retina scanners, military-grade reinforced fencing, thermal imaging cameras, heavy automated steel gates.
It's like a movie.
It does. The budget is entirely depleted, but the executives sleep soundly. They have purchased an impenetrable fortress.
I mean, on paper it sounds flawless. You have removed the human error of checking ID badges.
On a spreadsheet, in a boardroom, it is flawless.
Mm.
But reality does not happen on a spreadsheet.
Right.
It is 2:00 a.m. on a Tuesday in November. The weather is brutal. Freezing rain blowing sideways.
Sounds miserable.
It is. And the security guard working the third shift at the gate is underpaid, cold, exhausted, and incredibly annoyed. Now, that state-of-the-art biometric scanner the board bought, It takes 15 seconds to authenticate every single incoming truck driver.
Which, 15 seconds doesn't sound like much until you have a massive logistical backlog.
It creates a massive backlog. There's a line of 18-wheelers backing up onto the public highway. The drivers are tired, they are behind schedule, they are laying on their horns, screaming at the guard to speed it up.
Oh, I see where this is going. The guard is trapped between a technological bottleneck and intense human pressure.
Exactly. So what does the guard do? The guard is not malicious, they aren't a corporate spy, they are just a human being trying to alleviate immediate stress.
So they bypass it.
Yes. The guard looks around, finds a 50-pound rock, and physically wedges the automated multi-million-dollar steel gate open.
Wow.
They bypass the retina scanner completely and just start waving the trucks through to clear the highway. The $20 million technological marvel is completely defeated by a tired human and a rock.
That is a staggering visual, and when you break it down like that, the technology didn't fail at all. The retina scanner performed exactly as engineered.
Perfectly.
It was the human behavior, the environmental friction surrounding the technology, that caused the systemic failure.
The organization bought a tool, but they completely failed to establish a control.
A tool versus a control.
Right. And this semantic distinction is the dividing line between an organization that is actually secure and one that is just wealthy and lucky. The rock wedging the gate open proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that a tool is not the same thing as a control.
Let's spend some time on that distinction because I think the entire cybersecurity industry conflates those two words constantly.
They use them interchangeably.
Which is so dangerous. A tool is just an object with latent potential. It's a piece of software, it's a physical server rack, it's a machine learning algorithm parsing network traffic, or in the case of our shipping port, it's the physical biometric scanner.
Right. It is a tangible asset you purchase from a vendor. It is potential energy.
And a control.
A control, however, is kinetic. A control is the systemic integration of that tool into human behavior, into organizational policy, into daily workflow, and into leadership clarity.
So it dictates how it's actually used.
Exactly. A control dictates exactly how that tool is managed when the pressure spikes. When it is 2:00 a.m., the rain is freezing, and the truck drivers are screaming. A tool without a control is just a very expensive paperweight.
Or a very expensive wedged open gate.
Exactly. Davis addresses this by breaking down a dependency framework consisting of 4 pillars. To build a genuine control architecture, you must have organizational, technological, physical, and personnel controls operating in unison.
So they all depend on each other.
The critical, unforgiving thesis of this framework is that if any single pillar is weak, the entire structure collapses. You cannot allocate 90% of your budget to the technological pillar and ignore the organizational pillar, because the organizational failure will simply bypass the technology.
Like the rock. Okay, let's dig deep into that organizational pillar because, based on the sources, this seems to be where companies frequently trip over their own feet.
Oh, constantly.
If the organizational pillar is the bedrock, we're talking about defined processes, clear risk matrices, and absolute clarity on who holds the authority to make critical decisions.
Yes, but the fatal error most executive teams make is confusing a control with a bureaucracy.
Oh, I've seen this.
They suffer from the delusion that if they commission a 200-page, legally dense PDF policy manual, have a consulting firm brand it, and upload it to the corporate intranet, they have magically established an organizational control.
A manual that absolutely nobody in the company reads. I'm guessing the transition from a theoretical PDF to a practical control is where the system breaks down.
Completely. To understand the difference between bureaucratic red tape and true organizational clarity, we have to look at the mechanics of a crisis. Let's paint a picture of a junior analyst working the night shift in the Security Operations Center, the SOC.
The absolute front line of digital defense.
Right. It is 3:00 a.m. on a long holiday weekend.
Always.
Always. The physical office is completely empty. The executive suite is asleep or off the grid on vacation. This junior analyst is sitting alone, monitoring the network telemetry. Suddenly, the dashboards light up. They are watching a live, massive data exfiltration.
Just for the non-technical listeners, an exfiltration means the data isn't just being accessed, right? It is actively being packed up and shipped out the front door to a server controlled by an attacker.
Yes. It is a catastrophic digital heist happening in real time. Gigabytes of highly sensitive corporate data, perhaps client financial records, or the proprietary source code for the company's flagship product, are actively pouring out of the network. So the junior analyst sees this anomaly clearly. The technological tool did its job. It spotted the theft. But the organization's so-called control That 200-page PDF manual contains a specific clause.
What does it say?
It mandates that in order to intentionally sever an active external server connection, the analyst must secure the documented, written authorization of a vice president.
Oh, that is a nightmare. At 3 a.m. on a holiday, the analyst has to wake up a VP just to stop the bleeding.
The internal monologue of that junior analyst is pure panic. They know that if they wake up the VP at 3 a.m., kill the connection, and it turns out this massive data transfer was actually a legitimate, albeit poorly communicated, business process.
It's like a scheduled backup.
Exactly, maybe a scheduled overnight backup to a new cloud vendor. They will face the wrath of management. They will be screamed at for disrupting core business operations. They might even be fired for overstepping their pay grade.
So they are weighing the abstract risk to the company against the very immediate, very tangible risk to their own career and livelihood.
And human nature dictates that self-preservation wins. Every time.
Wow.
The analyst is paralyzed by fear. So what do? They choose the path of least resistance. They decide to monitor the situation.
Monitor the situation.
Yeah, they draft an email summarizing the anomaly, flag it with high importance, and send it off so the VP will see it when they log in at 8 a.m.
But in the context of a network breach, a 5-hour delay isn't just a delay, it's a total loss.
By 8:00 a.m., the data is gone, the connection is closed, and the attacker has vanished.
Unbelievable.
The bureaucracy, the supposed organizational control designed to protect the company, did not stop the attack. The bureaucracy actively aided the attacker by neutralizing the defender.
Okay, that sounds good in theory, but what happens in reality?
What part of that seems theoretical to you?
Well, I have to argue this from the perspective of a fast-scaling business, right? Or maybe a tech startup that is growing exponentially, or an agile enterprise trying to beat competitors to market.
Okay, fair.
If you're telling me that I need granular organizational clarity on every single decision and strict protocols outlining exactly who has the authority to push what button, isn't that just corporate red tape by a different name?
I see where you're going.
Startups live or die on velocity. They move fast and break things. If you enforce that level of rigorous structure, aren't you just slowing the business down to the point where it becomes entirely uncompetitive?
You are echoing the classic eternal friction point between the security team and the operations team. Operations wants speed, security wants friction.
Exactly.
But we have to address this uncomfortable truth directly.
Yeah.
Because it is the core of Davis's philosophy on leadership. Clarity is not red tape. Ambiguity is red tape.
I want to make sure I understand that. Ambiguity is red tape.
Think about the junior analysts in our scenario. Look at the exact mechanism of their failure. What slowed them down?
The fear of getting fired.
Right. It wasn't clarity. It wasn't a strict, clear protocol. It was the ambiguity of their own authority and the intense fear of the consequences. A true organizational control does not require a VP signature at 3:00 a.m.
What does it require?
A true organizational control empowers that junior analyst with a pre-authorized, unquestionable mandate to act.
So the control is essentially a cultural rule that says, if you see the specific pattern, you have the unilateral authority to pull the plug, regardless of your title.
Yes. The culture dictates that the analyst is expected to sever the connection first and ask questions later.
But what if they are wrong?
That is the true test of the control. It comes the morning after. If it turns out to be a false alarm and the analyst accidentally disrupted a legitimate backup, how does leadership respond?
They usually scream.
A weak leader screams at them. A scanner leader looks at the analyst and says, "Good catch. Thank you for being vigilant and protecting the perimeter." Next time, the IT department needs to inform the SOC when they schedule a massive backup.
Oh, wow.
That is clarity. Clarity eliminates the fear of decision-making, which drastically speeds up the response time. Bureaucracy and fear paralyze a network. True organizational clarity empowers aggressive defense.
Okay, that logic holds up perfectly when we are talking about a centralized SOC analyst sitting in a secure building dealing with a rigid hierarchy.
Sure.
But the narrative changes when the physical environment changes. We just saw how fear paralyzes someone in the office. What happens when the office no longer exists?
The dissolution of the perimeter.
Yes. This is where the physical and personnel pillars of the framework violently collide in the modern remote workforce. Because the old medieval castle analogy of cybersecurity.
Where you build a massive firewall, have a single drawbridge.
Right, and everyone inside the castle walls is implicitly trusted. That architectural model is completely dead.
It has been dead for a decade. Your corporate systems are constantly dynamically connected to cloud infrastructures, remote third-party vendors, open-source libraries, external APIs.
The threats do not wait for you to be sitting at a trusted desk on a secure subnet.
No, they don't.
Let's describe this new physical reality with a scenario that happens every single day. I'm thinking of the fintech developer at Starbucks.
Yes. It is the ultimate stress test of the physical pillar.
You have a brilliant lead developer working for a major financial technology startup. This individual holds the architectural keys to the kingdom. They have elevated access to the core production databases.
They have the keys to the castle.
Exactly. But because the company embraces a modern, flexible work culture, this developer decides to work from a busy, trendy coffee shop in a metropolitan area on a Tuesday morning.
As one does.
Right. They have their company laptop open, and they are logged directly into the live production environment, tweaking code.
So the corporate perimeter is no longer a physical building with ID badges and turnstiles.
No.
The perimeter is now a wobbly wooden table next to an espresso machine, surrounded by 50 strangers.
Exactly. So the barista calls out their name for their latte. The developer stands up, walks 20 feet away to the pickup counter, grabs the coffee, and walks back to the table. The entire physical movement takes maybe 40 seconds.
But crucially, they did not lock their computer screen.
Right. From their perspective, why would they? They were just stepping away for a moment. They still had a visual line of sight to the laptop.
It's just 40 seconds.
But let's look at the mechanics of what happens in that 40-second window of physical exposure. Someone sitting at the very next table. Maybe it's an intentional corporate spy who tracked them there, or maybe it's just an opportunistic threat actor who recognizes the terminal window on the screen, leans over.
It happens fast.
They take out their smartphone and they snap a high-resolution photo of the developer's screen.
And visible on that screen, sitting in plain text in the code editor, are hard-coded API keys.
Yes. For anyone not deep in the engineering weeds, an API key is essentially a digital master password. It allows different software programs to communicate and authenticate with each other silently. If an attacker possesses that key, they don't need to try and hack through your expensive firewall.
No, they just walk right in the digital backdoor, and the system welcomes them because it thinks they are an authorized program.
Exactly. Millions of dollars spent on quantum-resistant encryption, military-grade multi-factor authentication, and advanced endpoint behavioral analysis.
All of it rendered completely useless in 3 seconds by a camera phone in a coffee shop.
That exposes a massive blind spot. The failure wasn't technological. The failure was a physical control intersecting with a lack of personnel awareness.
Yes.
It proves that physical security is no longer just about badge readers at the corporate headquarters. It is about the physical security of the endpoint, wherever that endpoint happens to be in the world.
Which logically forces us to examine the personnel pillar.
Right.
The failure of the developer to lock the screen is a human failure. But we have to be incredibly careful how we define and implement personnel controls. Because when HR departments and compliance teams talk about employee awareness, it almost always descends into pure compliance theater.
Oh, compliance theater. You mean the dreaded mandatory training video?
The absolute worst kind of corporate busy work. It is a mind-numbingly boring 45-minute animated video about basic cyber hygiene that every single employee is mandated to watch by the end of Q3.
I know exactly what you're talking.
You know exactly how this plays out. You click play, you immediately mute the browser tab, you go back to answering emails on your second monitor.
Or playing a game on your phone.
Right. And then you guess your way through a painfully obvious 5-question multiple-choice quiz at the end.
Question 1. Should you click on an urgent email from a Nigerian prince asking for your corporate bank routing details? A, yes, B, no.
Exactly. You get your auto-generated PDF certificate of completion. The HR department puts a green check mark in a massive spreadsheet, and the executive board looks at that spreadsheet and declares, look, we have 100% completion. We have robust, comprehensive personnel controls.
And it means absolutely nothing.
It is entirely delusional. It changes exactly 0 behaviors.
So if a cartoon video isn't a personnel control, what is the reality? How do you actually control human behavior in a decentralized environment?
The reality is deeply rooted in behavioral economics and organizational psychology. True personnel control is about psychological safety.
Wait.
And I want to be very precise here. Psychological safety functions as a hard, measurable security control.
Wait, psychological safety as a hard security control. That sounds like a soft HR buzzword leaking into the Security Operations Center.
I know how it sounds.
How does the emotional state of an employee mathematically protect a network firewall?
It protects the network because silence is the greatest, most devastating vulnerability any organization possesses.
Silence. Walk me through the mechanics of that.
Let's look at the actual granular mechanism of a modern cloud breach. We can call this the GitHub leak scenario.
Okay.
Let's say a mid-level developer makes a very common, deeply human mistake. They are rushing to meet a brutal sprint deadline late on a Friday afternoon. They are stressed, they are exhausted, and they accidentally hard-code an AWS administrative credential, a root key that controls the company's entire cloud infrastructure, into a software repository on GitHub that is set to public instead of private.
Ouch. But realistically, anyone who has ever written code knows that happens.
It happens thousands of times a day, globally. Now, the developer realizes their catastrophic mistake about 5 minutes later.
The panic sets in.
In a corporate culture that lacks psychological safety, a culture where mistakes are severely punished, where the CTO manages through intimidation, where people are publicly shamed or immediately fired for errors, what does that developer do in that moment of realization?
Their heart drops into their stomach, they panic, they try to quietly delete the commit, rewrite the Git history, which is basically trying to digitally shred the security camera footage so no one sees you walked in the room.
Exactly.
And they pray to God nobody noticed. They absolutely do not walk into their manager's office to report it.
They choose silence. The cover-up begins. But on the public internet, silence does not buy you safety. It only buys the attacker time.
Right.
There are highly sophisticated automated bots operated by global ransomware cartels that continuously scrape public GitHub repositories 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, looking for exactly this kind of human error.
Just constantly scanning.
That automated bot likely grabbed the exposed root credential within 4 seconds of it being posted.
So the attackers now possess the master keys to your entire cloud infrastructure. They own the network.
But your highly paid, heavily armed internal security team has absolutely no idea because the one human being on Earth who knew the perimeter was breached was too terrified of their own boss to speak up.
That is wild.
The vulnerability sits entirely hidden in the shadows until the ransomware cartel decides to deploy their payload 3 months later, encrypts the entire corporate network, and demands a $5 million payout in Bitcoin.
Wow. So an HR manager running a toxic, punitive performance review process or a VP who leads through intimidation is actively, literally degrading the network perimeter.
Yes.
The fear they instill dismantles the company's security posture just as effectively as turning off the firewall.
But that assumes people behave rationally, which they don't.
Right. This is exactly where I need to challenge this proposed solution of a forgiving culture.
I expected you would.
If you were telling me that if an employee makes a catastrophic mistake, leaves the digital vault door wide open, and jeopardizes the survival of the entire company, management should just hug them and offer them a cup of tea.
That's not what I'm saying.
If there are no severe consequences for catastrophic failure, aren't we just incentivizing gross negligence and sloppiness? Why would anyone double-check their work if they know they won't be punished for a breach?
That is a very common but very dangerous misinterpretation of the concept. And I want to clarify it fiercely.
Please do.
Psychological safety is not an exemption from accountability. It is not a license for negligence. The goal is not to eliminate consequences. The goal is absolute, immediate visibility into the state of the network.
So visibility takes precedence over punishment.
It has to. The unbreakable, non-negotiable rule of leadership in cybersecurity is this. You punish the cover-up, not the mistake.
Oh.
If that developer immediately walks into their manager's office, pale and shaking, and says, "I messed up. I just leaked a root credential to the public internet 5 minutes ago. We need to roll our keys," meaning we need to instantly invalidate that password and generate a new one and shut down access right now, the manager should absolutely not fire them.
What should the manager do in that high-stress moment?
The manager should look at them and say, "Thank you for bringing this to me immediately. Let's lock it down together."
Just like that.
Because by reacting that way, the manager ensures that the next time someone on the team makes a mistake, and they inevitably will because they are human, they will report it immediately too.
Right.
If the culture rewards immediate disclosure, the security team rolls the keys in minutes, the exposed credential becomes useless, and the automated bot gets nothing. The breach is contained before it begins.
But if you punish the honesty, you guarantee future cover-ups.
The behavior you reward is the behavior you get. Silence is the vulnerability. Radical transparency is the control.
Okay, this inability to see the whole picture, whether it is an employee hiding a mistake in the shadows out of fear, or a company relying on isolated tools that don't talk to each other, brings us right back to the power of the scanner personality we talked about at the beginning.
We're coming full circle.
Right. If the goal is radical transparency, how does a leader actually architect visibility across a sprawling, chaotic, global enterprise?
This is where we have to look at the structural, architectural choices leadership makes regarding their technology stack. Specifically, we have to address the massive problem of security islands.
Security islands. I love that terminology. It perfectly describes the fragmented reality of most corporate networks. Organizations suffer deeply from the best-of-breed syndrome, don't they?
They do, and it is usually driven by good intentions.
Yeah.
A diligent IT director goes out into the market and buys the absolute best award-winning firewall from vendor A. Then they research and buy the top-tier, industry-leading antivirus suite from vendor B.
And so on.
Then they set up a highly specialized, separate intrusion detection system from vendor C. They think they are building elite, impenetrable defense.
But what they are actually building is a fragmented nightmare of complexity.
Exactly. They are creating security islands. You end up with a security operations center featuring 5 different vendor dashboards, all flashing red with alerts, but none of the systems share telemetry and none of them share context.
Oh.
The poor security analyst, sitting in the middle, has to somehow play detective and manually figure out if a flagged IP address on vendor A's dashboard is related to a strange file download on vendor B's dashboard.
That's impossible at scale.
They have to determine if these isolated alerts are part of a coordinated multi-stage attack or just random background noise.
To bring this back to an analogy that avoids the IT jargon, let's look at air traffic control.
Perfect.
Imagine the air traffic control system at a major, bustling international airport. You have a United Airlines flight arriving, a Delta flight departing, and a dozen private jets circling in a holding pattern.
A standard Tuesday.
Right. But in this specific control tower, the radar system tracking the United Airlines flight is fundamentally incapable of communicating with the radar system tracking the Delta flight.
That is a terrifying scenario.
It is. The human controllers in the tower literally have to print out the physical flight coordinates for one airline, walk across the room, and hand them to the controller managing the other airline so they can manually compare notes.
Just unbelievable friction.
Mid-air collisions, which in this analogy represent catastrophic network breaches, happen during that manual translation delay. The network is actively crashing while the expensive tools wait for a human being to translate the alerts between systems.
So delay equals risk. When an anomaly occurs on a fragmented network, it takes vastly too long to piece together the narrative of where it happened, how it happened, and what is currently compromised.
Right.
That delay is the defining tragedy of a security island architecture.
I think you're ignoring something really important here, though.
What am I missing?
Well, I'm putting myself in the shoes of a chief information security officer facing a sophisticated threat actor.
Okay.
If I have the budget to buy the best-in-class, highly specialized, hyper-focused expert systems in the world for each specific piece of the puzzle, why on earth would I trade that in for a generic, bundled, unified threat management system, a UTM?
To get visibility.
But aren't I just settling for mediocrity across the board? If vendor A has a 99% catch rate for malware, and the UTM only has a 94% catch rate, why would I give up that 5% edge just to have everything on one convenient dashboard?
That is the pure idealism of the boardroom vacuum talking.
Is it?
It absolutely is. You have to look at the chaotic reality of the high-speed cyber battlefield. I will push back on that idealism strongly. Deep integration beats isolated specialization every single time.
Why? If the specialized tool is mathematically 5% better at its specific job, isn't that worth the integration hassle?
That 5% edge is entirely worthless in reality. Think about the mechanics of how you connect those isolated tools.
The APIs.
Right. You have to build custom API connections between vendor A and vendor B so they can share data. But every time vendor A releases a minor software update, that custom API breaks. When you have 10 specialized platforms, you have 10 fragile custom integrations. Every update breaks something, which means your highly skilled IT team spends half their week just writing custom code to keep the tools talking to each other instead of actually hunting for active threats.
Oh, wow.
And when a real attack happens, that broken API causes a 20-minute delay in reporting the telemetry.
And as we established with the SOC analyst, in 20 minutes the data is completely gone.
Exactly. The 5% edge in detection is negated by a 100% failure in communication.
That makes perfect sense.
UTM isn't just about IT consolidation or saving money on licensing fees. It is a profound leadership decision to prefer holistic architecture over the accumulation of tools. You stop hoarding isolated software and you start designing a cohesive, communicative system.
This brings us back to the scanner trade. The scanner leader prioritizes the overarching network over the individual node. Davis ties this directly to the concept of visibility, doesn't he?
He does. He introduces a fundamental principle of visibility that is the absolute bedrock of digital sovereignty. What is central is seen. What is seen can be managed, and what is managed can carry responsibility.
Let me just sit with that for a second. What is central is seen. If your critical security alerts are scattered across a dozen hidden submenus in 5 different vendor portals, they aren't seen.
And if they aren't seen, you literally cannot manage the risk. And if you cannot manage the risk, nobody can be held accountable when the breach inevitably happens.
Everyone just blames everyone else.
In a fragmented system, everyone just points fingers. The internal IT team blames the vendor's API update. The vendor blames the internal network configuration. The security analyst blames the lack of context. And the CEO is left holding the bag in front of furious shareholders and regulatory agencies.
A unified threat management system forces visibility. It puts everything in the light.
It does.
But let's talk about how a leader actually implements that, because migrating a massive global enterprise from decades of entrenched, highly specialized legacy systems into one unified platform, that sounds like a logistical nightmare of epic proportions.
Oh, it is brutal. It requires significant, highly coordinated planned downtime. It requires completely retraining your entire IT staff on a new interface.
The training alone.
But most importantly, it requires fighting severe internal political battles. The VP of marketing will fight the CSO to the death to keep their specific isolated web analytics tool because they like the interface.
Right.
The database team will refuse to migrate because they don't want to learn a new protocol.
So if it causes that much pain, why do it? Why not just patch the holes in the boat you already have?
Because navigating that immense, painful friction is the ultimate crucible of leadership. A weak leader, a diver, looks at the logistics, gets terrified of the internal pushback from the department heads and says, let's just keep what we have, don't rock the boat, it's too politically costly.
The easy way out.
Exactly. A scanner leader, a sovereign leader, understands that UTM is an architecture of absolute clarity. They endure the massive short-term political friction, they absorb the complaints and the anger, because they know they are securing the long-term survival of the business.
They see the big picture.
They choose to undergo a controlled, painful surgery now to avoid a sudden, fatal heart attack later.
That is an incredibly powerful way to frame the burden of leadership. But if managing our current static technology stack requires this immense clarity and leadership strength, what happens when we introduce systems that are specifically designed to think for us?
You were talking about the AI trap.
Yes, the exact technology every executive board on the planet is currently obsessing over.
It's everywhere.
Artificial intelligence integrating with automated network defense. On the surface, it seems like the ultimate tool for what the sources call cognitive convenience.
Cognitive convenience. It is a highly seductive, dangerous trap. We have to look at biology here. The human brain is an energy-hoarding organ. It is constantly looking for heuristics, shortcuts, and patterns to reduce its cognitive load.
It's lazy.
Basically. When you present a stressed human being with a highly articulate, incredibly fast AI summary of a complex, million-line network log or an automated network defense decision, the brain is flooded with a sense of immense relief.
Because the machine has done the heavy lifting, I don't have to read the logs.
The brain immediately shifts from analytical, effortful thinking into relaxed, automatic thinking. It's exactly like following GPS instructions.
Oh, right.
People will literally drive their cars into lakes because the GPS told them to turn right and they completely turned off their own spatial awareness.
They just trust the machine blindly.
In cybersecurity, we look at the AI's confident risk assessment and we just accept it without verification, because verifying requires energy we don't want to spend. Leaders are deeply tempted to completely abdicate their judgment to the algorithm.
And honestly, why wouldn't they be? If I have a system that can process 10,000 logs a second, a volume of data a human team couldn't read in a month, I should let it make the decisions, shouldn't I?
No, you absolutely shouldn't, and here is why. This forces us to completely redefine digital sovereignty.
Right, because usually that just means where the data is stored.
Exactly. When we hear the term digital sovereignty in the mainstream news, it's usually framed as a geopolitical issue data residency, keeping European corporate data on European servers to comply with GDPR privacy laws.
Yeah.
But Davis frames it in a much more intimate operational way. Digital sovereignty is about maintaining cognitive authority over your own business.
Cognitive authority, meaning I don't just know what the decision is, I understand why the AI made the decision.
Yes. You can delegate a massive computational task to an AI, but you absolutely cannot delegate systemic responsibility because the liability, when the dust settles, remains entirely human.
That is the harsh reality of the aftermath. If an AI hallucination causes a system failure, or the AI makes a catastrophic error during a massive corporate merger and automatically approves a compromised vendor, when the regulatory fines hit your desk, the government agency does not sue the algorithm.
No, they don't. When angry shareholders demand answers on a disastrous quarterly earnings call, you cannot put an AWS server rack on the witness stand.
Right.
You cannot point to a generative language model and say, the algorithm made the mistake, it's not our fault. The liability, the moral weight, the reputational damage, and the severe legal consequences fall squarely, unavoidably, on the human leader.
The AI isn't going to federal prison for criminal negligence. You are.
Maintaining digital sovereignty means using AI as a powerful amplifier for your capabilities, not as an abdication of your accountability. You must maintain a critical, verified distance from the output of the machine.
That breaks down under pressure, doesn't it?
How so?
Let's be real about the punishing rhythm of corporate life. It is Friday at 4:00 p.m. The CEO is screaming about a massive, heavily advertised product launch. The development team is exhausted, the servers are lagging, and an automated AI system suddenly flags a potential vulnerability that would require halting the entire launch to investigate.
I've been there.
In that moment of intense, blinding pressure, when millions of marketing dollars are on the line, nobody has the time or the mental bandwidth to sit around philosophizing about cognitive authority.
Right.
They're just going to look at the AI's percentage of confidence, click approve, and launch the product to save the weekend and quiet the CEO.
You are absolutely right that the pressure is real and the pressure will always optimize for the shortcut, which is exactly why Stephen A. Davis introduced the concept of the consequences compass and the broader operational metaphor of Security Thursday.
Security Thursday, the title of this deep dive. Let's finally dig into the mechanics of that. What exactly is it?
If human beings default to cognitive convenience under pressure, if our spinal reflex is blind actionism, you cannot just tell your team to be more careful.
Right, that never works.
That doesn't work. You have to engineer a structured, mandatory mechanism to force a pause. The consequences compass is designed to fight that reflex. It requires the decision maker to stop just for a moment before approving a risky bypass and answer 4 specific questions.
Let's walk through that compass. I want to see if I can deduce the flow based on what we've talked about.
Yeah.
I imagine the first few questions have to deal with the immediate reality of the problem, right? Like, what are we actually trying to achieve here?
You are on the right track.
Mhm.
The first 3 questions ground you in the immediate reality of the request. Question 1. What is the best possible outcome of this decision?
Okay,
Question 2. What is a positive side effect or secondary benefit?
got it.
Question 3. What are the immediate costs, friction, or operational trade-offs?
Honestly, those first 3 questions are exactly what the overwhelmed IT director is already calculating in their head at 4:00 p.m.
Yeah, they are.
The best outcome is the launch happens on time. The positive side effect is the CEO stops screaming and the team gets to go home. The cost is maybe a slight deviation from the policy manual or ignoring a low-confidence AI flag.
Exactly, which is why the entire power of the compass hinges entirely on the 4th question. The first 3 are just the setup to get you engaged. The 4th question is the anchor point, and it is absolutely non-negotiable.
And that is,
But what is the absolute worst-case scenario?
wow, that cuts right through the operational noise.
It forces the leader to mentally map out the potential disaster. If we ignore this AI flag, push the code, and it turns out to be a real vulnerability, what happens?
The wheels fall off.
Do we expose millions of lines of customer data? Do we face a massive class action lawsuit? Do we lose our market reputation overnight? Forcing the brain to articulate the worst case scenario snaps it out of the comforting haze of cognitive convenience and forces it back into active, painful responsibility.
And Security Thursday is the macro version of this compass,
Yeah.
right? It's not just a day of the week. Security Thursday is a metaphor for intentionally carving out protected cognitive space in the chaotic work week.
A pause.
Yes. Monday through Wednesday is pure operational firefighting. It's tactical execution dealing with the urgent demands of the business.
Right.
Friday is the exhausting rush to the weekend.
Right.
Thursday represents the cognitive sweet spot where you actively, aggressively block out the noise. It is the mandated time where the urgent is simply not allowed to interrupt the important.
Oh, it's the designated time where you ask the deeply uncomfortable systemic questions that everyone usually avoids because they're too busy.
Exactly.
Like, are our AI tools serving our judgment, or are they secretly running the company? Or, if we faced a massive crisis tomorrow at 4 p.m., do our junior engineers actually have the psychological safety to pull the emergency brake, or will they hide?
Precisely. If you do not intentionally carve out that protected space to find clarity, the operational noise will consume 100% of your bandwidth 100% of the time.
You'll just be reacting.
You will be flying blind at extremely high speeds, relying on tools you don't fully control.
This has been a massive, comprehensive journey today. We started by completely dismantling the illusion of purchase security, the dangerous idea that you can just buy a $20 million gate, hand the responsibility to a machine, and go to sleep.
We mapped out the critical semantic difference between a tool that has latent potential and a systemic control that integrates human behavior, physical reality, and absolute leadership clarity.
We highlighted fear as a literal exploitable vulnerability, showing how a toxic culture that punishes honesty is actively doing the work of the ransomware cartels for them.
And we champion the scanner's unified vision, recognizing that migrating to a unified threat management architecture is a brutal but absolutely necessary crucible of leadership to ensure you can actually see the threats you are managing.
And finally, we reclaimed digital sovereignty from the algorithms, realizing that while AI can process an infinite amount of data, only human beings can carry the weight of responsibility, which leaves us with a direct call to action for you, the listener.
Tomorrow morning, I want you to look around your office or look closely at the dynamics of your next Zoom meeting and ask yourself a very uncomfortable question.
Yeah, ask this.
Are your security dashboards and protocols actually empowering your team to make mature, safe, autonomous decisions? Or are they highly complex, expensive, bureaucratic alibis designed primarily to protect management from liability when things inevitably go wrong?
Where is your organization moving incredibly fast simply because pausing to find clarity would force a conversation nobody wants to have? I want to leave you with a final provocative scenario. It is the ultimate test of your organization's true security posture.
It really is.
It's 4:30 p.m. on a Friday. Your team is completely exhausted. A massive deadline is looming. The CEO is waiting for the green light. And a highly pragmatic but slightly risky shortcut presents itself in the code.
A classic dilemma.
What does your team do? Do they take the shortcut to save the weekend, hoping the automated tools will catch any fallout? Or do they possess the psychological safety and the unshakable leadership backing to hold the line, delay the launch, and save the company?
That's the real test.
The answer to that question, what they do when nobody is looking and the pressure is at its absolute peak, that is your actual security posture.
Security is not a control problem.
Yeah.
It's a leadership decision.